Then, on the opposite side of this existential plane, lived some beautiful old people whom this malevolent force could not affect. My intuition told me it was the ascended Master Moriah and his wife Miriam. The old woman, who was disguised in this way, because the ascended masters, it is said, are eternally youthful. She began to explain to my wife and me, that this was how they met in their love relationship and that little by little they were obtaining the keys to finding peace on these inner planes. Americo Living Trail 455 El Moriah didn't talk much, and suddenly, when this master wanted to teach us something about our lives, that strange and malevolent force generated an enormous hurricane of gray water. Master Moriah immediately made us get into a truck, and began to advance through this hurricane. He approached some pyramids, and then, in the distance, I could see the famous giants of Tula, carved from enormous stones. The master told me, "Come up, brothers, come up to the top of these pyramids, keep going." And we advanced along a stone staircase, amidst this storm of grey waters, and I still heard him say, "When you reach the top, in this very village, you will find the indigenous person who holds the keys to the place, and thus a new path will begin at this point in your life." My intuition called me to visit Tula, Hidalgo, because Hidalgo was also very significant in my relationship with my partner, and because of the encounter between Quetzalcoatl and the celestial Tula, and for my disciples, the terrestrial Tula. This was the reason why I was even more encouraged to visit Tula. On September 16, 1999. On the morning of September 13, 1999, I was accompanied by my wife and a disciple in Tlatelolco, right next to the building called September 15th, to place the cross on Sister Rihanna, who had been named Priestess of Mexicanness for the Order of Friars Minor. On September 15th of that same year we spent that night celebrating in satellite, at the home of a physical sister of our spiritual sister. On September 16th, we visited Tula, Hidalgo. The goal was to give thanks for having been able to make these pilgrimages and to be in direct contact with the earthly Tula, so that a search for Quetzalcoatl on his return to the heavenly Tula could begin. We had a good time and were optimistic, hoping that our order will become a reality. Coincidentally, only my wife, as a disciple, and 2 other women from the order attended Tula. Each one was a priestess of a cosmic ray, forming the triple flame together. We climbed the medium-sized, but famous pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, and when I saw the so-called giants of Tula stationed on its upper surface, I felt a deep emotion, because they were identical to the ones I had dreamed about previously. Accompanied by one of my sons, I played the conch shell in the 4 cardinal directions, and a rumbling sensation within the pyramid resulted from this act of playing the conch shell. Political parties and fanaticism. Americo Living Trail 456. At the end of September, I heard a lot of general concern about the importance of following a political party, but I realized that this fanaticism affects people negatively. So in this moment of extreme attitudes, I came to the conclusion that whoever gives himself to his party with fanaticism betrays the people. Of course, it does not refer to those who act with balance. The mysterious old man and the confusion of the sister of the order. In early November 1999, one of the sisters who had been important to our group in the last few months decided to leave the order. In reality, she was thrown into confusion when, in a strange way, a mysterious old man, who I later learned belonged to La Mexicanidad, appeared at her business. He knew in detail about the existence and history of our order. And I don't know who told him, or how he found out. But, wrapped in this mystery, he explains that Americo is destined to become a planet, but that she is the chosen one, because she must become a star. He envelopes her, and tells her that her destiny will soon be to become a sun. Exaggerating his attitude a little further, during his mysterious visits trying to oust Americo, he persisted in exalting his feelings toward the sister of our order and added, "Just by seeing you, you've made me the happiest man on the planet, because you're a goddess." He then warns her that he will not see her again until they both meet in a ceremony. Of course, this wasn't true, because after a few days, he continued to appear and give her written lessons related to Mexican identity. This greatly confuses our sister, who was already absent on our trip to Tula Hidalgo. She is also hurt, because Maestro Americo decided not to attend her civil wedding. All of this was something I felt compelled to address in Circular 16. Everything has happened so quickly around my poor, but beloved brothers and sisters, that deep values cannot always be assessed in their true measure. Fortunately, I realized long ago, that I'm the leader of myself, and no one else. I try to inspire them to open a workplace, but they insist on setting the tone their own way. It's only natural that a place won't emerge in such a short time. The most important thing is themselves, and once they've given something to the pilot group, there's no way to consider them a failure. Everything has its time. I think the key is to find the true master, because without him we are nothing. And to be part of a true group. Americo Living Trail 457. We can never despise the hosts of light, and even less the presence of Christ Virgin, Christ Goddess. We must truly touch without touching. In this regard, I remember what a disciple told me. There are two options, Master: either everything in life is a miracle, or there are no miracles. As for me, I prefer the former. I agreed. Another of my students came to me one day, very happy, and told me a little story that had impressed him. It was about a king, a wise old man who finally found solace, because he discovered that everything will pass. So, I smiled and answered him, it seems I'm wiser than this wise king, because I have discovered that the most important thing is that everything remains. That is, everything passes infinitely outside, but in being, everything remains. Basically, Master Estrada taught that the definition of law is what happens once, happens all the time. In the last week of November 1999, I began to convince myself that, in reality, I, as a person, should not struggle against external circumstances, but rather be conscious, and, in this inner state, realize what it means to be immaculate. Esoterically, the fourth ray is the immaculate purity. When the circumstances surrounding us no longer matter and our calm has no influence, then we are invulnerable. We have become masters. And dealing with this from the point of view of astrology, the masters had told me, in the horoscope, you can't experience trine and square signs at the same time. You experience one or the other. Concepts of transformative economy. On the other hand, the issue of money was taking on an unusual definition, in my experience. For example, I hypothesized that money is the point of balance between what we desire and our state of consciousness. Desire is feminine, and in consciousness it represents masculine. Americo Living Trail 458. If we learn not to desire money, it ceases to be necessary, even though it exists. Because, after all, money is there to satisfy desires. That's what it means, knowing how to use it. If in this context we establish a trinity, then we have that use is equal to the Father, conscience represents the Son, and desire represents the Holy Spirit. 0 as a number for counting the centuries. In early December 1999, I participated in a family discussion about timekeeping systems in human history. My conclusion is that 0 is fundamental, and even systems that ignore it nonetheless use it. It's like not accepting God, but relying on Him. In this sense, the so-called -0 or negative numbers are considered complex numbers, and this is only possible because their existence occurs within 0. Inevitably, everything occurs inside, never outside. Everything is mental. God already existed before He existed. In this sense, the unity of the decimal system already existed and exists. Circular 18 and Gandhi of the New Age. It is also at the beginning of December that I begin to air my ideas, to give shape to Circular 18, which basically deals with the following. The new Gandhi of nonviolence for the New Age is not someone who makes the decision not to kill human beings, if necessary to defend himself, or his fellow human beings. On the contrary, he is prepared for this eventuality should it prove inevitable. This does not mean that I'm thinking about killing, but only about eternal, universal, perfect and imperturbable peace. What happens is simply that, on the human level, everything moves in continual errors of thought, feeling, and action. Only the master controls error, but humanity cannot. So, the master contemplates and thinks, not to compare, or disparagingly judge human beings, but to learn and become perfect. To love everyone without distinction of creed or social caste. It is universal love, perfect desire, immaculate passion. Those who kill desire are not the best, because in reality, it is not possible to kill desire. The truly best, then, are those who control desire. Americo Living Trail 459. The Gandhi who fasted to save the world, takes up his method, but not literally, but rather in the integral art of controlling his desires, renouncing them in appearance, not literally. In reality, renounce without renouncing, sacrifice without sacrifice, touch without touching. And in this fasting of its totality, it forces the world to love and love consciously, really. For the love of humanity, he loses his external freedom, by subjecting himself to the daily flow of his worldly obligations. But since it is impossible for him to lose his real freedom, it turns out that the victory of determinism that seems to restrain him is, in the master's experience, only a transmutation of it. Freedom expanding in space is only an effect of freedom contracting in time. It is no longer a question of the crucified master, but of the one who is ascended without yet being so. The New Age disciple is free as an expansion in space, but that doesn't prevent him from awakening his freedom as a contraction in time. Just as it is with the New Age master. Therefore, humanly speaking, no one can know the master's desires. No one can know the cause of what he manifests with his human freedom. It is not even possible to detect it with certainty in the simplest and most everyday acts of his life. Because humanity is not yet ready to witness such a natural and possible happiness in everything. This New Age Gandhi doesn't just live with his dead desires, he controls them, and preserves them, as if they were invisible. As in an integral fast, so that those who are worthy may awaken to conscious love, and discover the master's human desires, having discovered that they are precisely the true desires of evolving humanity, represented by the New Age disciple. Without this comprehensive fasting of the master of the New Age, it is impossible for humanity to ever awaken. This humanity, so accustomed to treating royal masters as beggars or fakirs, stripping them of all dignity, only then to feel loved. Threatening them with death, only then to recognize them as heroes or gods. The famous tithe that every church imposes on its parishioners, is the tithe that Gandhi demands in the New Age. But he's not referring to money or not money. It's abundance. It refers to the fact that, if a human discovers that the desire for good is the same as that of the master, then the master must be helped in the total work. It is a tithe not only of things, but also of virtues. And the disciples ask the master. Americo Living Trail 460. What does Maestro need? But they are not yet ready to leave everything, and give everything in pursuit of the New Age mission. That is, to give up your vices, and be truly happy. Therefore, they give the master what they consider to be good. However, the New Age master has not been given a place in the human machinery. Humanity easily confuses the false master with the true one. And if the truth speaks to make them understand, for that very reason, it's easy for them to consider it presumptuous and self-serving. And they see it according to their own tendencies toward a separate self and egotism, typical of every human being who lacks authentic evolution. This means that humanity is not ready externally, yet internally it already belongs to the New Age. It already desires the master's presence. And this is a universal fact today. Externally, they give in to the false teacher. When all this changes, the saying "every eye will see him" will be fulfilled. Yet his closest followers and witnesses generally consider him a vagrant. Because they are not ready to be free from what externally binds, and separates us from one another: schedules, jobs, political issues, social classes, national differences, genetic inheritance, customs, etc. And it is fine to use all this, that belongs to the human world, but the bad thing is to become its slave. If there is anything forbidden for the world of the master and the disciple, it is this separateness that enslaves. They say to him, "What do you want?" But they are not willing to give a little more of their time, a little of what they consider their money. They are not even willing to adopt a lifelong discipline in evolving practices such as meditation, yoga, proper nutrition, natural water baths, positive thinking, love, touching the world without touching it, etc. We must fly with the master, to know what he desires. And we must be simple of heart to understand that it is not he who leads us to ruin. It is not he who threatens our properties, our family, and everything we dream of as good in our often mediocre little world. In any case, it is every failed human being who brings misfortune to his own world with his way of living. Americo Living Trail 461. We must fly with the master to truly give him, and in giving everything, recognize nothing as loss, but as absolute gain. It's not a literal and foolish giving everything, but rather giving everything in the little or much we give Him, without upsetting our finances or our lives. This is what absolute gain is all about. So far, everything related to the first part of Circular 18. My birthday is approaching, and 3 days before, the Master tells me, you can do whatever you want, everything has already been done. This leads me to a freely accepted commitment. It means I can't do anything outside of it. Lolly Cosmic. A point now is, when I truly understand what it means to obey. Group visit to the ASRHAM of Kuala Morales. The second part of Circular 18 refers to the events of the visit to the GFU External Ashram, Lini Solar, in Kuala Morales. This is the second time I have attended this ashram, since I left my retreat. The events began on Friday night. We were supposed to go to a quinceañera party at a salon, and the couple of disciples we invited, took a while to arrive. When they introduced themselves, she explained that there were a series of obstacles, starting in the morning, when they had to get up, and the alarm didn't go off. Then, when she went out to lunch at work, there was a schedule mix-up and they wouldn't let her into her office. And when she got there her car wouldn't work. So someone helped them, and they got it working. Something was definitely trying to hinder them. Having developed my tolerance since the pilot group was founded, I assimilated what had happened. The party was enjoyable and the chamberlains of the quinceañera, as a whole, represented the colors of the triple flame. They gave us food that had meat broth in it, which made my wife sick, causing her to feel unbearable. Right on Saturday night, the Pink Lama sister had decided to go with her boyfriend, and not be with us on Sunday. But he was feeling unwell, and she returned that same Saturday night, to stay at our house. We all laughed heartily. Americo Living Trail 462. Sunday morning had setbacks, like having to run the water pump, pick up 2 of our children, etc. However, the time was record time, and at 10:03 a.m. we were entering the ashram of Kuala. Just the day before, searching through my personal belongings, I had found the small ivory white elephant with a white cord, a medal that accompanied me throughout my own retreat. It had been given to me by my then partner. It was something that at the time, I gladly wore as a protective talisman. I was aware that the white elephant, according to the Master of Lothair, represents the 5th degree of royal initiation. Incidentally, at that time, I physically saw the image of a group of elephants holding each other's tails with their trunks, forming a circle, while standing on a rose or something similar. I was impressed that their weight didn't damage the rose. In short, when I find the humble medallion among my personal belongings, I consider it good to keep it, and, if appropriate, give it to my friend and disciple. I had it in my bag, and just before we got in, as he got out of the car, I asked him to kneel right here on the street, before we passed through the ashram entrance gate. With all humility, and without question, he does so. And he places this talisman on him as a recognition of a 5th degree of initiation, royal. I deliberate nothing, believe nothing, assure nothing, or speculate nothing. I simply hand over this talisman to you. It's simply allowing myself to be guided by my feelings. Because everything is possible, if the disciple himself elevates himself to that possibility. What I want, is to protect them all, since they are protecting me on this new visit. Now that they are a small group, at the time we visit this beloved ashram of Kuala, we went straight into the sanctuary, and there stood Venerable Master Marcelli and the members of the fraternity. I could still recognize several of them. But they had changed so much. And I had no way to heal them. Perhaps that wasn't my mission. Out of respect we hide our crosses from our order. During the ceremony, I witnessed that, as before, at a given moment within it, the ethereal face and body of Maestro Estrada overlapped that of Maestro Marcelli. This gave me joy, and nothing more. Out of respect I wore my Jagnian cross with the cord almost white from use. I perceive a lot of fanaticism among the brothers regarding this fraternity. When, during the ceremony, a woman kneels before Maestro Marcelli, asking him to place the half-Jagnian cross on her, my friend says to me, "Are you already a priestess?" Americo Living Trail 463. Some of the audience listen to him, and I say quickly, and with natural nervousness, "Shut up." This is another world, you're on another planet, Los Sacerdotes ate something else. Then, after the cosmic ceremony is over, when everyone gathers together in a group, I tell them to be careful, because it's as if we've come from the planet Venus to Earth. Everything is different. My old friend, whom I taught to make bread, recognized me and approached me in the garden, surprised to see several of my groups surrounding me. But there wasn't much to say, and after exchanging a few words, he said goodbye. Although he obviously liked me. After this visit, we went to the nearby Oakstepec Beach Resort. There we swam with the children and siblings. The money issue was handled smoothly, because everyone was so willing. It was a very enriching experience, and I wonder, if Gandhi were to appear in the New Age, what would he do when faced with the circumstance of dealing anonymously with an institutionalized GFU? What he would do, is remain silent and act in silence. Renounce all his titles, special attire, and official mastership. And with this impersonality, infiltrate his own, who are not limited to a particular fraternity. This New Age nonviolence is the method of action of every true emissary of light, to interact with any institution with guaranteed success. The following text catches my attention. What has been, that will be, what has been done, that will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes. Message on television. In early January 2000, while watching a television program, an actor confesses, "I used to be a fool with dreams. Now that I see them fulfilled, I'm no longer a fool." It also expresses, failure has many interpretations. Success has none. For some reason this makes me realize that I am the culmination of human dreams. And certainly, it is beautiful to be worldly, but even more wonderful is to take the path, and become a true initiate or a royal priestess. Not just as a title, but as a realized experience. A writer named Beatrice Espijo says, "Love is perfect while it lasts." They ask him, Americo Living Trail 464. What does it take to find love? Be in a state of grace. It must be so, because love is the light that illuminates the entire life of those who experience it. The long strike at the University, and its deep motives. In 1999, shortly before the long Onam strike began, I remember dreaming for several nights about those who would later become leaders of the student defense movement. When I dreamed about them, I had no idea who they really were. Only later was I able to place them at the moment when these students actually appeared in the public eye. In my dreams, I saw myself trying to convince them to do something to help the Mexican people who needed it survive, and after I finished talking to them, I wondered if these people could do it, because I honestly felt they lacked the strength. The university students began the strike after the UNAM rector, without consulting the university community, proposed that the university council approve the general tuition fee regulations. This fee is required of students, to cover the basic expenses of their education. He did this without consulting the university community, which, in response, began the strike at midnight on April 20, 1999, which would become the longest in UNAM's history. The president-elect Republican, the then Secretary of the Interior, due to their activities, thought the proposal made by the rector was fair, and on Friday, November 12, they accepted it. They later decided that, in light of the events, and for the university's autonomy, it was better for the university members to resolve the issue. It was a mistake on the part of the university rector to overrule the student council. And on April 20, the University Student Assembly transformed into the General Strike Council, CGH. There was enthusiasm among these student leaders of the movement. What was missing was a real awareness of what the New Age means, and the presence of a true universal brotherhood on the planet. A New Age politics and a realization of being. Resentment still lingered in their hearts, and their convictions had been influenced, even through official studies, by violent political doctrines. These ideals were corrupted by the people's desperate struggle to survive in these final months of the 20th century, amidst the drama of Mexican history. But they were trying something new, and then, a wonderful situation happened during this process. Americo Living Trail 465. At Los Sacerdotes University, these students began to practice a fraternity like never before in their lives as students, as human beings, and as citizens. They began to experience a schooling, where freedom was the foundation of their encounter with life. All because, due to circumstances, the students met day and night as spiritual brothers and sisters, to raise money through a collection. They went out with their collection cans, and climbed onto buses, and wherever there were people. They managed to collect about 17,000 pesos a week, 100 pesos an hour, basically enough to feed the community of about 500 people. The interesting thing was that during this process, that peculiar strange pressure that has been constantly felt in the general atmosphere of the world's universities was changing. It was the asramic life, the place where a master lives with his disciples, a return to the teaching of the academies of the ancient Greeks. In the style of the secret schools of Memphis and Egypt, of the Comcac in Mesoamerica, of the True Light in the temples throughout Europe throughout its 20th century history, where religion and science are not at odds. Of the high wisdom of all those Buddhists in the East, and, in general, the knowledge that for eons has always been transmitted in a direct line of love wisdom. And it was becoming possible here, like an incomprehensible emergence of life. For the first time, the students were embracing the ashramic life. They couldn't understand it, but they were living it. They began to group together, and cooperate with each other in their respective schools, and at the university city, located in Mexico City. The temperaments of the students from each faculty within the university began to surface, and for the first time, they all truly began to get to know one another. For, incredible as it may seem, there hadn't been time for that before. So now, those in medicine, could interact and learn about what was at the heart of those in philosophy and letters, while those in economics, could do so with those in engineering, etc. Thus, sexual liberation also began without falling into degeneration, since their very social commitment to the people prevented it, and they strove to do things well, as an example to follow. But it was still a scandalous act, considering the narrow criteria, and therefore unacceptable in the way of life of a community. But out of an instinct of love, or perhaps because their sense of brotherhood was stronger among them, they respected each other's partners. And if someone liked someone, they were respected. It was an unforgettable experience for the students, as they were able to sleep with their loved ones, and their privacy was protected. They were learning about the delights of the retreat without having any idea of what this word means in the light of truth. Communism is a state of consciousness, and to help others, we must first achieve perfect self-control. They didn't know it, but they were trying this path. Genuine communism revolves around the immaculate intimacy of the collective. While it does so, based on the immaculate intimacy of being. Thousands of excited students are at El Evento, where the long-awaited freedom explodes. It becomes a refuge for those who leave home, and don't expect to return. Americo Living Trail 466. There is evidence that at high school number 4 there was a marriage between two young people who were expelled from their homes. Each faculty became a commune. The most active was the science faculty, which took over the cafeteria, which for the first time felt like it was theirs, and not their father's. Because of this, even though they served set portions, it was acceptable to repeat. In philosophy, they set up their own little room, and there, as a reliable Mexican magazine attests, just like in engineering, the couples had their best nights of lovemaking. They posted signs suggesting condom use, since babies aren't a good idea during a strike. In engineering, both playfully and seriously, they established their own list of demands. 1. Hot women. 2. Beers with lunch. 3. Table dancing in wet t-shirts. And lest anyone think these students were unwilling to study, the engineering students set up a computer center with internet access, and established a telecommunications commission, to repair the electricity and telephone subsystems of the various faculties. The psychology students formed therapy brigades, to assist those in crisis due to the breakdown of their family ties. The medicine students organized first aid. The entire movement, that has been launched, becomes a full-time cause. A life in the emergency. And if you ask them what political current they follow, most don't choose a specific banner, but rather politics as a direct experience. The celebrations that were taking place through the continuous mass marches were mainly to express in the streets their discontent with the closed, private, and mechanical systems imposed by general human ignorance, in protest against a blind policy, dedicated to turning the university into a biological robotics laboratory instead of a sacred center of impartial wisdom. The fight was against the program that aims to turn humans into machines instead of truly educating the people of the world. So these marches were real outbursts, sometimes quite disorderly. But they were an emerging way to unleash their mystical sentiments, approved by a large segment of the population, in favor of a true awakening of the collective consciousness. The leaders of the student movement weren't fully aware of what they wanted. Unfortunately, there was still resentment in their young hearts and anger in their overly intellectual minds, vulnerable to the political tendencies of revolutionary violence. For this very reason, they were rebellious children toward their parents. And that one might suspect, at the same time, like a chronic illness, the authorities despise and have despised, as the history of the taxation process has shown, anything a student might have to say. And it's evident that this is reflected in their authoritarian disdain for the university community. Perhaps because, in general, parents are accustomed to dictatorially ruling over their own children. Thus, they are regrettably unilateral, causing adolescents to be considered incompetent. Without the authorities really stopping to think about them, about their needs, desires, opinions, and dreams. Americo Living Trail 467. This has been a fixed trend, existing in the political authorities of the world, which in the university field is evident, considering a priori that, as a rule, students are children who do not know what they want in this life. That is hard and difficult. This authoritarian attitude of the father and the resentment in the hearts of the students truly prevented dialogue and real judgment. But even so, there were things that the people were beginning to feel. Basically, something was wrong with the very reason universities exist in these modern times, where corruption is the order of the day. The fundamental error is that the world's universities are concerned with knowledge, but they are busy generating in their classrooms only automatas to fill positions in their companies. Indeed, before wisdom and love are incorporated into student development programs, university programs are still primarily designed to generate human machines. Precisely people who don't think, but only assimilate what is desired, and go out in the semi-asleep state to look for a job. It seems that, according to a scientific study, the main concern is that consciences won't awaken, and that they will never pursue a path of true fulfillment. That's why the Reventones Marcus have been so gratifying to the thirsty souls of the students. And why this enormous ashramic life, that the university achieved its Iuda Universitaria during this sensitive process of student liberation was so unique. It's true that the students demanded a public dialogue. But deep down, they were also immature enough to accept points in favor of the university authorities. They were too hurt, and what they wanted was simply revenge and the complete dismissal of all the authorities. Clearly, there was a lack of judgment. As they themselves said, they didn't want to continue being Generation X, they wanted to find a path, and yet they didn't know exactly which one. And it wasn't precisely about not increasing university fees, but rather about truly making higher education available everywhere, all over the world. Let the university not be the absolute catalyst for making money, but rather truly generate comprehensive abundance, so that every citizen has the opportunity to realize themselves. And only then will money come as an extra. But it's clear that students and authorities have not been able to rise to the level of a great universal brotherhood, even though they are learning. This is the reason why on Thursday, February 10, 2000, 100,000 people marched through the streets of Mexico City, under the apparent pretext of demanding the release of students detained by the country's authorities. But in reality, it was because something was calling them to change, and to the true search for a return to the life of ASRHAM, that the high wisdom of all times demands. It was a unique manifestation and a culmination of this entire aspiration for a true path toward the indisputable realization of the truth. Americo Living Trail 468. Draft Circular 21 and the End of the UNAM Strike. In an essay for Circular 21, I shared my comments with my small group, and still in February 2000, I expressed my feelings regarding the takeover of UNAM by the Mexican Preventive Police, under the authority of the new rector, supported by the federal government. I think it was for the best, as I sensed that this would prevent bloodshed. But this does not mean that passions have ceased to rise, and the wounds of the people have ceased to bleed. Mexico's various political parties are in turmoil. Even true political elites, such as the mayor of Mexico City and others, are expressing their revolutionary spirit and openly declaring their rejection of the authorities' abusive participation. What is certain is that this plurality of parties, where only one party can no longer control the country, increasingly resembles a royal democratic assembly representing the people. There is no longer a supreme party, but rather various parties and a boiling point of struggle, as no one knows exactly what the elixir of peace so desired by the hearts of the people is. The good and the bad are mixed together, but as Maestro Estrada says, everything is cooking. Indicted students are still trapped in dark alleys, and sent to jail like criminals. They are vilified by society like many other unjustly accused citizens. It seems then, that the old Inquisition of the Middle Ages is still alive, roaming the darkened streets and ruined churches. As one interviewee said, many students are treated like criminals, and yet many real criminals still walk freely down the street. In another roundtable discussion broadcast on television, one of these intellectuals honestly confesses that this is happening because, as parents, we haven't acted well with our children. There are still those who are truly frightened, and find shameful the topics of sexuality, and, on the other hand, ecclesiastical theology is far from accepting the study of God defined as a set of laws enough to participate impartially in a fraternity with science. As for those who claim to be esotericists, occultists, astrologers, fortune tellers, or parapsychologists, they are treated as mere witches or religious fanatics. Unfortunately, some of them are. Even the strikers themselves, when the university authorities finally agreed that tuition would not be raised, refused to leave the facilities they had taken over, all because they knew something was wrong, something was missing. Perhaps what's needed is a praxis of existential mathesis. The Yug as a way of life. Americo Living Trail 469 from Circular 21 to 22. I wrote Circular 21 to convey to my students a whole series of romantic thoughts about women and the emotions that were affecting me at that time, but for some reason, I was beginning to feel the need to bring the entire circle around the sign of the Son of Man to a close. While traveling with the group to Master Estrada's retreat, Zimpazahua, Jalapa, I was able to see the signs of the events. Maybe because we had already visited the Kuautla ashram. It was my wish that they would visit the GFU World Ashram located in Cotepec, Veracruz. For this reason, I typed out Circular 21 with the idea of giving it to you during a discussion we would have once we were in Jalapa, Veracruz, which was the departure point for Zimpazahua, very close to Cotepec. In the note at the end of Circular 21, I specified that Circular 22 would address the topic of the group visit to Zimpazahua, Jalapa. Incidentally, I must mention that for some reason I felt I should only write 22 circulars. First, because there are only 22 major arcana cards in the tarot, and second, because I realized that the events were closing a specific phase in my path, and therefore, if I wanted to continue writing guidance, I would no longer call them circulars, but something else. Furthermore, what we were about to do happened to fit in with what many people, in their own ways, were looking for. Unbeknownst to me, when the brother in our group went to Jalapa to book a hotel, he found that almost all the places were booked. This was certainly due to the fact that many restless spirits from all over the country were stopping in Jalapa to attend the festival held in El Tajin on March 17 through 21, 2000. This was where the spring equinox would be celebrated. It was the Tajin Summit 2000, the Millennium Spring, a 5-day event featuring modern technology, musical activities, indigenous games, workshops, rituals typical of the region, and a rich and varied cuisine. Would take place. 100 hours of entertainment, lectures, 40 workshops, and a tour of the archaeological site were planned. It was the biggest festival that had been seen in recent times. More than 7,000 national and international visitors were expected at this multimedia event. But my friend was lucky, and was able to reserve our spot at a prestigious hotel, located in the very center of Jalapa, for its historic traditions, and we were ready to go. Circular 22. Towards the center. The last phase of the sign of the Son of Man. Americo Living Trail 470. August 1999, March 2000. Towards towards Jalapa. Even with the fresh memories of the recent trip to Jalapa, others are included, leading to uneasy conclusions within me. I respected the experiences and enthusiasm with which my relatives and acquaintances spoke to me about their various journeys, including those to Coatepec, Veracruz. However, it wasn't just the journey that was important, but the pilgrimage. In this sense, the initiates are the path, past and future, within the eternal present. We had tickets for the bus that would leave from the bus station located in the San Lazaro metro station for Jalapa. There were 6 of us. But all of them were special brothers to me, respected for their inner development. All of them, a small group convinced of the selfless work we were doing. Next March 21st would be Tuesday, but for work and practical reasons we decided to leave on Saturday at 10 a.m. The truck would stop in Apizaco and then, again the highway would pass very close to the town called La Gloria. I'm pleased to see that our truck includes a very Reverend Jelling, 3rd degree of royal initiation, according to the GFU, solar line. A brother whose face is somewhat familiar to me, from more than 15 years ago, when I attended the fraternity. When the bus stops in Apizaco, almost all of us get off to take a break. I'm in the waiting room of this bus station, while my brothers in the group have run to buy candy, or go to the bathroom, and this very Reverend Jelling passes very close to me. In that instant, I think of him with love, wondering what the difference is between him and me. Then, the voice of silence immediately responds with its message of light. He belongs to the institution, but you are the institution. I remember the saying, the great universal brotherhood is a state of consciousness. When we arrived at the terminal in Jalapa, we headed toward the taxi rank, and ahead of us was the very Reverend Jelling, boarding a taxi ahead of us. We arrived in downtown Jalapa, and looked for the hotel. It was located on Zaragoza Street, and was called the Meso de Alferez Hotel. It's next to the elegant Hotel Maria Victoria. I can't help but associate Maria Victoria with the triumph of the mother of a new humanity. I also remember the 2 films we were shown on video, while traveling from Mexico City to Jalapa. The first deals with the love of a couple, like an eternal love that conquers all. And the second is about a man who is used in an avant-garde experiment. He gets pregnant and manages to have the baby. Americo Living Trail 471. During his pregnancy, he feels what a woman feels and discovers that the egg he carried in his seemingly male womb belongs to the woman he loves. The 2 meet, and he conceives the baby. This ultimately makes them both happy. This second film leads me to conclude that the enlightened one actually experiences something similar to what a woman does when she gives birth, and then it turns out that my own companion on the path becomes the mother of that state of consciousness, embodied in a group, the formation of an order. Finally, as I stood at the hotel entrance, the legend tells us that Alferez had been loyal to the King of Spain, but when the independence struggle of 1810 began, led by Miguel Hidalgo, he became a sympathizer of this movement, and was therefore stripped of his privileges, forced to live in this hotel, which was his home, for the rest of his life. The brother and sister pair, who are having a passionate romance, are as restless as children, and have already gone to investigate some of the rooms we reserved. Then, they rush over to me, especially her, laughing and stumbling, trying to get me to agree to give them the key to the room, which has a small loft. I think as quickly as I can and agree. In this hotel, all the rooms have a distinctive name, and it seems that the brother's room is called Ensign, or something like that. I retain the room keys. I give the female couple the key to the witch's corner, and I choose the one above the reception room, next to the hotel entrance, for my wife and me. It's called Juanote. After a bath, everyone attended the meeting we had scheduled, which was to take place in our room, to read Circular 21, and explain the reason for our trip. I would like to point out the coincidence of Juanote and the mission of John, disciple of Jesus Christ, as well as the coincidence of the names of the other rooms, and the temperament of the respective brothers. Towards Zimpazahua. We arrived at the Zimpazahua hacienda by taxi as night began to fall. It resembled the biblical passage that says, "I will come like a thief in the night. I will be among you, and you will not recognize me." With the main intention of establishing contact, and experiencing the state of the place firsthand, for the visit I'm making this time with my group, I ask about the restaurant's opening hours. We are told they're only open until 6 p.m., and that they don't open until after that time. So, taking advantage of the trip, I asked permission for those in charge of the place to let us into the sanctuary of Maestro Estrada, where he held his ceremony when he made his retreat at this hacienda. Americo Living Trail 472. The restaurant server is so kind and trusting, and we feel so familiar that he leads us there, as if he were already waiting for us. He turns on the sanctuary light and says, "I'll leave you here. When you leave, turn off the light and close the door again." I waste no time. I recognize the place, making me aware of its special value now. At the time he placed me where Maestro Estrada supposedly did. I tell the brother to guard the door as a symbol of the guardian, and then his partner joins him. Everyone is passing by, kneeling before the master. The presence of Master Estrada, through me as an intermediary. I ask permission from the Christ of the New Age in the name of the I Am, and consecrate the small group of disciples, giving it to the celestial and terrestrial Christ, as well as to the order of the minor brothers. A great energy begins to be felt in this place. And once we finish the sacred act, we have a group discussion, to exchange points of view. Some of the group have further developed the ability called clairvoyance. One of them is worried, and tells us that when we arrived, she saw a man dressed all in white, who seemed to be waiting for us. But then, he was gone. My wife shares the dream she had on her previous visit to this place, about being a living symbol, and not needing an external symbol. The brother of the group mentions that he is seeing my aura of a very strong electric blue around my entire body. We're careful with the butterflies in the sanctuary, which not only fly, but also remain still and walk. They're very few in number, but they attract a lot of attention towards the ASRHAM of Coatepec. During the conversation, I tell the brothers that I hope they can meet Reverend Carlota tomorrow at the ashram of Coatepec. And if this is so, then the myth of Huitzilopochtli will be fulfilled. A Mexican legend that has already begun to come true, from the first time we visited this place, to pass through the invisible door, and begin the entire series of pilgrimages. This is its culmination. Well, if Huitzilopochtli manages to be born in Coatepec, after defeating the 400 Southerners, which in this case, refers to the lunar tendency of humanity, everything will have been fulfilled for the apostolic succession, according to a cosmic plan, that does not depend on human whims, but on Christ of the New Age. Americo Living Trail 473. We left the place, promising to return the next day, to eat at the restaurant. In the town church there is a large decoration alluding to Saint Joseph, since his celebration will take place tomorrow. Finally, the public transport arrives here, bound for Coatepec, and we board it. We then take a second transport to Jalapa. The bus drops us off at a place called La Rotunda. From here, we have to walk about 20 short blocks, before arriving at our hotel. During the walk, the group disperses a bit. My sister and my wife, who are with me, come across a nice pizza place. We decide to eat one, and they bring us a huge and delicious pizza. Before entering the hotel, we stop at the Marble Park, where 4 very symbolic statues are located. This place is called Ayuntamiento Town Hall, and is very close to the Maria Victoria Hotel. The statues are called Justice, Fortitude, Prudence, and Temperance. We waited for the whole group to gather again in front of our hotel, then decided to grab a light bite to eat at a nearby restaurant called La Parroquia, which is very close to our hotel. The next day, we settled our bill at the Alferez Hotel, and headed with our small suitcases to the new hotel, which is located around the corner and much cheaper. This hotel is called Maison del Cafito. The next morning, the group met at the hotel, and from there we headed to Coatepec. We had to board 2 taxis. Angelica and my wife boarded one. During the journey, we left the other taxi behind, and arrived first at the doors of the Coatepec ashram. We pay and thank the taxi driver, and as he turns around to return, through the area called the lanes, I see the taxi's number in large white numbers on the rear window. 400. This has a huge impact on me, and I feel a joy I can barely contain. It's just the number that corresponds to this taxi, to distinguish it from the others, but there are more than 2,000 taxis, and therefore 2,000 different numbers. However, this is clearly not a mere coincidence. I tell my colleagues who listen to me with pleasure. During this visit, the dramatic fulfillment of the rebirth of Huitzilopochtli was being sealed. It wasn't about holding someone against someone, or blaming the brothers of the GFU solar line. It was simply a drama that had to unfold on my path, because I was witnessing it. And because now there was no need, as Regina had done, to surrender herself and her 400 brothers in the plaza of Tlatelolco to a physical death. This tradition of offering blood, to allow our people to survive, was no longer appropriate, and was becoming an offering of energy, not pain. So the time had come to consecrate himself to the sun, the one marked by the sacred initiatory tradition. And this would be the way to overcome the lunar force. Americo Living Trail 474. The brothers from the other taxi finally arrived, so we walked together down the main path of Ashram that leads to the reception. There are several trucks outside, and it's a sunny day, but not stifling. These people are here, and this isn't always the case. It's like a party. Most of the people are dressed in white. I get the feeling they know something special is going on. I tell one of our sisters that this is the first time I have set foot in the Kotipek ashram since the end of my retreat. We entered the shop located in the reception area and set aside 4 photos of the master of the Ferrier. In the distance, I see an elderly woman with graying hair coming. It's the very Reverend Carlota Castaneda, widow of Estrada. Therefore, I remain cautious and, above all, want to recognize her clearly, since I haven't seen her for about 9 years. As she approaches, I notice a woman who appears to be helping her with her housework, leading her by the arm. The Reverend seems a little more hunched over to me, and since I don't consider it prudent to abruptly intercept her, especially since she's heading in the direction where most of the brothers of the fraternity are, then I wait, saying to my disciples with some emotion, "It's Reverend Charlotte, but it's better to wait before greeting her." As if driven by a magnet, I followed her at a distance, while my companions remained close by. When I saw that there were already brothers of the fraternity there, they were too restless, and expected them to monopolize her. I approached them frankly and greeted them, telling them that I was a Jegnian, and that there was a small group of brothers who loved her very much, and wanted to greet her. With her sweet gaze, she listened to me and accepted. The members of my group became more or less nervous, and each one shook her hand. But when it was my wife's turn, without being given the order to do so, she hugged her with emotion, and in a way that was difficult to describe, because of how affectionate and sincere it was. The hug lasted a little longer than usual, and Reverend Carlota sensed something different. I myself was amazed at the genuine and unexpected attitude of my companion, and while the hug lasted I said to the group, "What's wrong with you? Why didn't you hug her?" They didn't know what to answer. Shortly after, I told a sister that I was happy, because the contact of apostolic succession between the Divine Mother and her had already been made. Americo Living Trail 475. For this reason, when I gave the photograph of Drive de la Ferrier to my wife, I dedicated it to her, by writing on the back, "May the eternal feminine rise from its ashes in the spiritual embrace of the Divine Mother, in her apostolic succession." It was not about taking Coachosque and destroying her by dismembering her. It was not about belittling Reverendo with the title of the Daughter of the Moon, but about the embrace that marks the continuity of a cosmic mission that cannot be stopped, and that at the same time, inexorably fulfills the myth of Huitzilopochtli and his triumphant birth from the womb of Kotleku, Lawton and Sin. The ceremony is about to begin, and here stands Master Marcelli, on the area prepared for him to arrange his sacred elements. While this is happening, Reverend Carlota is sitting to the right of the single, central step of this improvised temple. A brother of the hierarchy, whom I know, approaches, lovingly strokes her hair, and exchanges a few words with her, as a son does with his mother. I'm restless, and I know what I have to do. She was within my reach, and before the ceremony began, I decided to approach her, ignoring the brother who was with her, and sitting next to Reverend Carlota, beginning to say to her, "Reverend, I had a dream a while back, but I didn't get a chance to tell you about it. It was a 92. More than a dream, it was a vision in which Maestro Estrada appeared to me, with his white beard, and said, 'Brother, you continue. You continue.'" Reverend was listening to me attentively, but absent-mindedly, of the enormous amount of information I was giving him, so I continued. "I had my partner at the time, and we already had children. She had such a temper, etc., and I left her." Reverend became restless, and I hurried to continue my story. "Since then, very special things have happened to me. Brothers in the fraternity didn't agree with me leaving my partner, but I did. Now I'm married to another woman. And the children, the Reverend asked me, worried. They are with us, and are doing well. Reverend smiles, but it seems to me that his attention is directed more to my family situation than to my life as an initiate. I wanted to give him a book about Christian life with a dedication. I showed him the cover and explained. Americo Living Trail 476. 476. They are the two avatars of the age. My intention was to avoid misunderstandings, since many lines have emerged in this fraternity. I'd like to give you this book, but if you prefer, I'll leave it at your house in a little while. She accepts. Some brothers would also like to talk to you, I explained. Upstairs, when we have breakfast, I'll talk to them, was his reply. Thank you. I realized as I returned to my place as a spectator at the ceremony, that there wouldn't be a moment to chat with Reverend Carlota. That might be another day. There were too many people. Perhaps she was telling me we would talk later, above. Perhaps on a higher plane, sharing the bread of life. The ceremony began, and as Maestro Marcelli faced the audience, he pronounced Dolef. I clearly saw Maestro Estrada enter it again. Then, when he gave his final talk, it was no longer Maestro Estrada who was in charge, but rather Maestro Marcelli's personality. It wasn't the same, but he had great respect for Maestro Marcelli and consciously loved him. The couple of disciples in my group were excited, especially the sister, and couldn't resist the desire to go and be close to him when everyone else had already started to move away. In the biblical message, given that day at the ceremony by Maestro Marcelli, one appeared from the final chapters of the Gospel according to St. John. It is the part where it says that Jesus had risen, but when Magdalene approached him, he ordered her not to touch him, because he had not yet gone to the Heavenly Father, but to tell his disciples that he had seen him, and would soon visit them. Master Marcelli explained that there was a mystery in the "do not touch me" phrase, which prevented Magdalene from approaching. He explained that the initiate must control his instincts, and then he will be able to touch his Magdalene without being affected. Shortly after, when we were at the restaurant in the Jalapa market, the brothers were interested in discussing the topic of sexuality. I remembered what Maestro Marcelli had explained and tried to complement this teaching. It is true that it refers to the process called brahmacharya or celibacy, that the aspirant to the degree of guru must undergo. But it also refers to touching without touching. In other words, it is not a literal non-touching. In my experience, physical sexuality is precisely what leads to enlightenment. As long as it is managed correctly, that is, with love. So celibacy consists of having Americo Living Trail 477 477 a truly monogamous life, and elevating the energy during carnal intercourse. It is right here that renunciation occurs, and our instincts are sublimated. When the ceremony ended, while most of the others went to the dining room, I led the group to the secret world chamber of Gagpa Angelan. We walked around it, and I asked the brothers to mentally fill it with the triple flame. As we sat down nearby to discuss, it seemed they agreed with me that it's very tiring for the teacher to place crosses one by one during the ceremony. Besides, people start to ramble. And if the teacher has to place 50 crosses, this isn't healthy for those present, or for the teacher himself. I thought perhaps it would be best to place them in groups of the same grade, and then, the key word, individually. What does the name matter? What matters is the group, I clarified. Perhaps the master should place only large crosses, that is, those of higher rank. Those of lesser rank can be placed by other hierarchs, disciples of the master. The master can bless all these crosses at once, in a ceremony, and then give them to those in the hierarchy, and in some antenage they place them on the corresponding aspirants. Then we visited the small shrine where, in the early 1980s, Master Estrada blessed me. Here we made a special relaxation based mainly on the decree, I am the presence of the Son of Man who now walks on the earth. We left this place, and walked through the dining room, which has a beautiful view of the entire ashram. Walking down a little to the left, I led them toward the geodesic, ecological house, a polygonal construction made of wood. This impressed them greatly. Back to Zimbazahua. We left ashram for Zimbazahua. There were quite a few people in the town of Coatepec. It wasn't easy to find transportation. We finally convinced a taxi driver to take us in his vehicle, for an additional fee. I accepted. We entered the town of Zimbazahua, and it was also packed with people. But this time it was because the